If you were to make a table of countries in proportion to the natural resources they have, the top one would almost certainly be Russia. She has everything: oil, gas, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, all the industrial metals, marvelous standing timber, a wonderfully rich soil. But countries are not rich in proportion to their natural resources. Countries are rich whose governments have policies which encourage the essential creativity, initiative, and enterprise of man and recognize his desire to do better for his family.
In an era where natural resource wealth is often equated with national prosperity, one of the most enduring counter-narratives came not from an economist, but from a stateswoman whose words continue to echo across generations. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, in one of her lesser-cited but deeply philosophical speeches, made a bold declaration: "It is not the ground beneath our feet that makes us rich, but the spirit within our people." It was a clarion call that cut against the grain of conventional thinking, and one that remains profoundly relevant as nations around the world wrestle with economic stagnation, political dysfunction, and post-industrial decline. Thatcher, never one to mince words, reminded the world that natural resources alone do not create prosperity. What matters is how governments unleash or suppress the entrepreneurial instincts of their people. History is replete with nations that sit atop oceans of oil, fields of rare earth minerals, or vast forests and fertile lands, and yet they languish in poverty, corruption, and political instability. From Venezuela to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the so-called resource curse has shown that raw material abundance can often distort economies, concentrating power in the hands of elites and discouraging the innovation and risk-taking that drives long-term growth. Thatcher saw this trend early and understood it clearly. Resources can be exhausted, but human ingenuity is inexhaustible, she said in a speech that has since been archived as a cornerstone of her political legacy. For Thatcher, wealth was never just about what could be extracted from the earth. It was about what could be built, invented, and envisioned by free individuals working in a society that valued enterprise over entitlement. When Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1979, Britain was mired in economic malaise. A country shackled by labor unrest, nationalized industries, and a deeply entrenched welfare state. Her radical reforms, widely controversial at the time, aimed to dismantle the post-war consensus and reorient the country towards a free market model that prized private initiative over government control. It was a political gamble, but the results were undeniable. Over the course of her premiership, the United Kingdom saw a dramatic revival in economic growth, a boom in small business creation, and the emergence of London as a global financial center. Thatcher's policies became a blueprint for reformers around the world, from Ronald Reagan's America to post-Soviet Eastern Europe, as the world confronts new challenges. From automation and AI to climate change and global inequality, Thatcher's legacy remains instructive. The temptation in times of uncertainty is for governments to centralize, regulate, and redistribute. But the real solutions, she argued, lie in the opposite direction: decentralizing power, encouraging innovation, and trusting the individual over the bureaucracy. This does not mean abandoning the vulnerable or allowing markets to operate without ethical bounds. Thatcher herself was clear: there is no liberty without economic liberty, but liberty without responsibility is chaos. Her call was not for laissez-faire anarchy, but for governments to act as facilitators of growth, not obstacles to it.
100%, Martin. Look, this government, we really can level the charge on them as being morally corrupt. This funding was promised in writing to the Express last year. And let's not forget, if we're talking about pennies in the greater scheme of things here, if we can afford to give away our strategic islands of the Chagos and pay 9 billion reportedly for that, and that's just a couple of days ago, we give 120 million to Sudan. We can surely give these chaps the right to travel on the taxpayers' money.
Now, it's worth pointing out that the Veterans Minister, Al Khans, he said on social media late last night, no doubt when this Daily Express front page drops, he said, for the avoidance of doubts, our government will ensure the support is there for Second World War veterans to attend V-Day and D-Day commemorations overseas this year. But the devil is in the detail, Major Shearer, and we've seen in the past that a small select group can be selected to go at the bequest of the government or the British Legion, for example, and what veterans broadly wanted was for every last surviving veteran. There can be hardly any left. The youngest has got to be in their late 90s. Most now are over 100.
Yeah, indeed. Look, it's shifty, isn't it? Their language, you really have to interrogate every word that they say. They can take the money from the foreign aid budget. Let's not forget, the greatest foreign act that this country has given in the last 100 years was World War II and saving the civilization of Europe. These men should be completely lavished with everything as they head towards their final salute to their comrades. Let's just see how the Prime Minister, let's see if he blushes when we're having our memorial service in November later this year. Will he have forgotten the words, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we give our today. Will he remember that?
In a statement laced with sarcasm and historical resonance, former British Army spokesperson Major Mike Shearer delivered a cutting response to news that the UK government will reportedly offer financial support for veterans to attend V-Day events. If we can afford to give away the Chagos Islands, he said, we can surely give these chaps the right to travel on taxpayer money. The remark, which has since gained traction on social media and in veterans forums, touches a raw nerve at the intersection of historical responsibility, national pride, and public spending priorities. The government's decision to fund travel for veterans attending Victory in Europe Day commemorations has been hailed by some as a long overdue show of respect. After years of criticism over the treatment of ex-servicemen, from inadequate mental health care to homelessness, even a modest financial commitment to help them participate in ceremonies marking the defeat of Nazi Germany is seen as symbolic recognition of their sacrifices. For others, however, the gesture is simply not enough. It's the absolute minimum, said one Royal British Legion representative. We're talking about individuals who risked everything for this country, and only now, as they reach the twilight of their lives, are we offering to cover their bus fare. Major Shearer's pointed reference to the Chagos Islands was not accidental. The UK government's controversial handling of the Indian Ocean archipelago, forcibly removing its native population in the 1960s and 70s to make way for a US military base, and resisting international pressure for restitution ever since, has long been a thorn in the side of British diplomacy. In 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that the UK's continued administration of the islands was unlawful, a ruling the British government has effectively ignored. To many, Shearer's remark illustrates a growing frustration within the armed forces community. We can spend millions defending a colonial embarrassment, one veteran noted, but it takes public pressure and a few well-placed headlines to get basic travel assistance for our oldest heroes. Major Shearer's statement, while delivered with a dry wit characteristic of many military men, carries a stinging rebuke of government priorities. The Chagos Islands episode remains a painful chapter in Britain's post-imperial legacy, and invoking it in the context of veteran support was a deliberate rhetorical move. In doing so, Shearer not only highlighted the absurdities of public spending choices, but reminded the nation that honoring its heroes must go beyond symbolism. For those who fought under the Union Jack, traveled the world in its name, and stood in defense of its values, a train ticket to a commemoration should not be something they have to fight for.